The following is a Red Apple Podcast Network presentation.
They say this is a big rich town. I just come from the poet's part. Bright light, city life, I gotta make it.
Welcome to Dominic Carter's podcast. This is Dominic Carter's City Hall. Now, here's Dominic Carter.
Red Apple Podcast Talk Radio 77 WABC. You can listen to me, Dominic Carter, Sunday nights 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., Monday through Thursday, midnight to 1 a.m. Have you ever heard of something called a co-occurring disorder? Your life or the life of someone you love could depend on it.
When that 11th grade bump in the road came, ACTs, SATs, and all of that pressure, he went to a party in my town, prescription pills were available, and that's when I could say for our family the game was over.
Harris Marquesano was a high school soccer star. By 19, he was dead of a fatal accidental overdose. He had an anxiety disorder as a child, turned to marijuana, and later to prescription medications. It was an attempt to cope and manage. He went to rehab 4 times. Co-occurring disorders, the dangers and threats of self-medicating with drugs and alcohol for those with underlying mental health conditions. His family had to live with the unimaginable. His mother, Stephanie Marquesano, decided to fight back by starting the Harris Project to help others, and that is exactly what she has done. Thank you, Mrs. Marquesano, for joining me. And let me begin this way. Tell us your story. The story of your 19-year-old son, Harris, who died.
So the story began at the beginning. A very bright, talented young person who struggled with an anxiety disorder from the time he was 3 years old. We were a family that was very involved. I'm an attorney by training, former PTA president and school board member, and not one professional that we saw when Harris was young ever said, good-looking, popular, social, athletic kid like you, but so much anxiety, you better be really careful around substances. That could be a spiral you go down really quickly. He later picked up the ADHD diagnosis, went on medication for the first time, went back to playing sports in high school. Really, his life had begun to get back on a really great traditional track. And then 11th grade came, stress and pressure. Am I playing soccer in college? He had been seeing a therapist who he stopped seeing because he was doing really well on medication. Therapist never said, stay in touch, things can happen, you might hit a bump in the road. When that 11th grade bump in the road came, ACTs, SATs, and all of that pressure, he went to a party in my town, prescription pills were available, and that's when I could say for our family the game was over. Within a year and a half before he died, he was in 4 substance use inpatient programs, 2 substance use outpatient programs, each program saying Harris has this thing called co-occurring disorders, mental health challenges, and substance misuse and addiction, and we treat it. But not one of those programs ever got to the mental health piece, and that's what drove each recurrence in use. So when my son died on October 23rd, 2013, and everybody wanted to know what they could do to support me, my family, my husband, my daughter, I said, I need to figure out co-occurring disorders. This is what's going to be my way to get up and get out of bed every morning, and this is the way that I'm going to save lives and improve outcomes for other young people and their families.
It's heartbreaking for me to hear you talk. I've been in your presence, and I have to tell you that I was uncomfortable in your presence because, tragically, you're part of the club now. One of the stories that I have a very hard time covering is interviewing mothers that have had to bury their child. And all of you that I have met in this situation, you're strong women. You try to hold strong, but there's a look in your eye that things will never be the same. You are a fighter, Mrs. Marquesano. How could something like this happen?
So, I mean, the situation happened because from the very beginning, from prevention, from the messaging that young people and their parents need to hear and understand, there was no such message. When it came to engaging with the system of care, with treatment, it was mental health or substance use. Do the substance use first, and then we'll get to the mental health. Or go here for your mental health and there for your substance use. So I often say that in my tragedy, I am truly like a very fortunate person because living in Westchester County, I was aligned with the Westchester County Department of Community Mental Health. The deputy commissioner at that time, who's now the commissioner, said, this is something that we're really interested in. This is something that we've watched, and we know that the moment is now. There are collaborations with agencies and school districts and community organizations. Me, the mom, I co-chair the co-occurring system of care committee for Westchester County. I work across the Mid-Hudson region on the systems piece. I'm now appointed to the opioid settlement board for New York State, where co-occurring disorders is an overarching theme with equity across all of the recommendations that we make. And so when people think, how do you get out of the bed in the morning? What do you do to kind of find hope and inspiration? I will say the systems piece, the getting the right treatment out is complicated. It's slower. The prevention stuff is incredibly empowering. It's, speaking to young people, watching the light bulbs go off, really getting them inspired to be change makers, to get help and support earlier, to really understand this link between why their mental health matters. When you don't take care of it, you might turn to substances to cope and manage, and how when your brain isn't fully developed and you're 25 and under, just using marijuana, alcohol, the prescription medication for a sports injury, wisdom tooth removal, and then all those illicit substances, you can change your brain chemistry and develop co-occurring disorders even if you weren't on track to. So I always say knowledge is power. We can spend countless hours talking about drug trafficking, border control, fentanyl, xylazine, now nitazines, which are the newest thing. But if people, and particularly young people, understand the risks of use from the beginning, they may say no out of the gate because they understand why. And if they are using substances and they're finding themselves in trouble, they know how important it is to get the right help and support earlier.
But Mrs. Marquesano, I've been to your home. I've seen pictures of. I met with you, and I've seen pictures of your son in his soccer days, and this was a kid that was so strong and a good-looking kid. I never met him. And he was playing high school soccer. The world was his. What in the hell happened?
Okay, so now I want you to think about a lot of famous people who've died recently by overdose. I want you to think about articles that you've read. Matthew Perry talking about how difficult it was for him to perform in front of a live audience, the anxiety he felt if he didn't get a laugh. So looking at the exterior of a human being and thinking what drives them, or wishing you were them perhaps, and not really understanding the internal turmoil is where we make our mistake. Mental health disorders are not something that anybody signs up for. It's something that's how, somebody's brain is wired, or it could be, their experiences that they've had. There could be environmental factors. But if we say somebody who looks like this shouldn't have this going on, it would be like saying somebody who looks like this shouldn't have cancer. And so I think that if we begin to unpack our own kind of biases and stigma around who it should be that's struggling, we can begin to change our ability to support and care about the human beings that are around us.
I'm glad that you said that, Mrs. Marquesano, because I didn't know how to get into it, frankly. And we're gonna play the PSA in just a couple of minutes. But your son, from a good family and affluent community in Westchester County in New York, this is not supposed to happen to a family like yours. That's the line that people would say, Mrs. Marquesano.
Well, the system of care was no better for Harris than it would be for anybody. And so, from my perspective, living in Westchester County, knowing, you have a national audience, but Westchester County is one of the most diverse counties in the nation. We have inner city, we have communities that are plagued with gang violence. We have horse country where there are stables. We have communities that have some of the wealthiest zip codes in the country. When I go in and begin to talk about co-occurring disorders awareness, when I empower young people with our 2-star logo to learn about what this is, it cuts across race, economics, culture, background, everything, because this is the human condition. So my goal is to change the system and make it better for everyone, no matter what your experiences are. And so that, to me, I think, is the game changer, is that it's not you or me, it's all of us.
Indeed.
And I think that was the goal of the PSA, was to really take a diverse group of young people to tell a narrative that reflected so many other people. We spent time with focus groups, meeting with young people in Westchester County who were part of our CODA prevention movement, speaking with parents other than me who had young children, people that have died. We spoke to young people who've gone through the right treatment protocol that we've brought to Westchester County called Encompass, who had failed in other kinds of treatment, to really understand the nuances, the subtleties, what an experience feels like when you're going through it.
We are trying to save lives. We are talking with Stephanie Marquesano. Her 19-year-old son, 19 years old, Harris, died of what is called a co-occurring disorder, the dangers and threats of self-medication with drugs and alcohol for those with underlying mental health conditions. So, Mrs. Marquesano, you just said, and I want to make sure that I heard you right, this kid from a good family, an affluent community, and he was forced to deal with rehab 4 different times?
Yes, he was in 4 different rehabilitation programs, many of them rooted in kind of shame and blame and abstinence-based, and, look how much money you're costing your family. Can't you just say no? And always promising that they were going to address the anxiety disorder, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but they never would get to it. Like, he would get in trouble for not being able to sit still during a 45-minute yoga meditation. Well, if you've got an anxiety disorder and you're no longer, taking substances to manage that, how could somebody expect anything else? And so you were discharging young people from programs that they needed to be in because you couldn't meet their needs. It's not the other way around. And I know that because now that we're, really working on these evidence-based treatment protocols and changing the way that we approach people using motivational interviewing, really, not so many groups, really individuals, so that you could unpack your stuff. I know that what we went through was not right. It was not the way to approach this. But when you think about people who struggle with their mental health and struggle with substance misuse and addiction, most people blame the individual. It's their fault. They should have tried harder. They should have just said no. Why is this so problematic for them? Instead of looking at how we deliver care, how we welcome them into a therapist's office, a provider of care, a rehabilitation program, that we're here to help. What happened to you? Not, why are you doing this again? And so beginning to change our perception and how we deal with humans, that's what's making the big difference.
We're going to play the PSA in which all the young people involved with it, it's my understanding they have a coexisting disorder.
So I just want to clarify just for your audience.
Okay.
So the lead is in recovery and has a co-occurring disorders diagnosis. the director of the PSA, also in recovery, co-occurring disorders diagnosis. Every member of the production team has either mental health or substance use, and the young people who are cared about, the work, but do not necessarily have a diagnosis.
Let's listen to the PSA right now. This is a PSA that your organization, the Harris Project, has done as it relates to coexisting disorders. Let's listen.
Mr. McFarland?
Okay, I got one. Drink if you've stolen clothes from Lisa's closet.
I like that one.
Come on, I know at least one person.
Drink if you have a crush on someone that's not your boyfriend.
Ooh, you said it, not me.
Drink if you posted a photo I look trash in because you look good in it.
Oh, man.
Drink if you have to drink just to be here.
Nobody.
Drink if you don't know why you just said that. Drink if no one likes you anyway. Drink if you replay every conversation you had that day in your bed at night. Drink if no one understands what you're so worried about all the time. Drink if you can't go to class without it. Drink if you're pretty sure everybody hates you. Drink if you've stolen your dad's pain meds because drinking doesn't cut it. Drink if you can't escape the thoughts in your head. Drink if you're so anxious it's happening again. Drink if you don't know what you just took. Drink to feel something. To feel nothing. Drink if no one even knows. If you're happy and you know happiness won't last. If you're depressed. If your mind is racing. If you're tired. If you can't focus on anything. If your mind won't shut the f*** up. Drink if you're afraid you won't wake up tomorrow. Drink if you don't care.
That is so emotional, so touching, so dead on. And I just hope that every American watches that, because folks listening to us from around the country, this can't happen to me. This would never happen to my family. Believe me, it happened to the Marquesano family. It can happen to any of us. A mother's pain burying a child. We are talking with Stephanie Marquesano. Her 19-year-old son, Harris, died of what is called a co-occurring disorder, the dangers and threats of self-medication with drugs and alcohol for those with underlying mental health conditions. Mrs. Marquesano, when I first met you, the power of one, you were one person fighting the good fight. Now you're national. This campaign, the Harris Project, has become national. I have seen stories on you in the New York Times. I have seen stories on you in terms of CBS News, different networks. I want to read to you. Well, before I do that, a quote from one of the articles. I don't mean to sound that I'm not sensitive to the situation, but after 4 stints in rehab for your son with his problem started in the 11th grade, how did you find out that your son was dead?
So he had been in a sober home, and his roommate brought pills in, and Harris had not taken pills in months and months. And the program director said, we can't have them stay here. We're going to put Harris. Harris was in college down in Florida in this program. We're going to put him in a motel. Don't fly down. He'll be fine. Either he'll just like sober up and be good, or we'll put him into a detox, but you'll be fine. And we should have known that a 19-year-old out of state in a motel would reach out to people, that he had met down there and some from up here, and that somebody would bring him something potentially, and that there could have been a high risk. But we listened to those who were the experts. We did not go down to Florida. And a police officer in his car drove down my block as I was leaving to run an errand. And I said, if he stops in front of my house, I'm in big trouble. And he did, and I was, and that was how I got the news. And so oddly coincidental, although I don't know if there are any coincidences, several years later, I was doing a training for the police academy in Westchester County, and that police officer was in the room. And he had wondered and he was like, I've been watching what you're doing. I was wondering how you are. He's like, and here you are in front of me. And I knew when I was speaking, I kept looking at the corner of the room, and there he was.
So did the officer ask you to come into your home, or did he tell you right there on the street?
He put me on the phone with a detective in Florida where Harris was.
And what did the detective say?
He told me that my child was deceased, that his clothes had been laid out on the bed because we knew that he had had a job interview scheduled for the next morning. And they had looked at his computer, and he looked to see how much he could safely take of the substance that killed him.
And, what your daughter, this is a tough interview for me, Mrs. Marquesano. Your daughter attended the same school where I went to graduate school, Syracuse University. And your daughter, as a result of what happened to her brother, she went into social work, correct?
She went into social work. She spent a number of years working with student athletes and then working for a provider, and then ultimately kind of found her way to using her soft social work skills in more of a business setting, more of, HR and sales and kind of support. So, everybody kind of has their journey. She's been a huge support to me with her expertise, doing workshops and presentations alongside me, and it just being, when we shot the PSA in California, Jensen came with me because I felt like her perspective, the TikTok generation and kind of knowing, what would be the right mark to hit. She was really a great presence and support for me there as well.
I remember looking at a photo of you, your husband, and your daughter, and I looked into your husband's eyes in the photo, and he was standing tall. And he's a better man than me, because I don't know if I could have survived something like this if someone called me and told me that my child who fell into drug addiction and a combination of issues, that my child was dead. What has been the impact on you, your husband, the marriage?
So my marriage is solid and really strong. I know that there are many situations where that's not the case, but for us, he was going back to work, he has a career and he was doing his thing, but he also has become an amazing mentor to a lot of young people in both his company, like at work, but also for Harris's friends, for our extended friend group and relatives. He's always speaking to the young people, particularly young men, about, choices in their career paths, about how their mental health might impact, their chosen direction, things that they can do to kind of ease some of that stress and pressure. And so we've all come through this very much our own way, but very much united, and with Harris really at the core of so much of our lives.
And so I want you to tell me, and sort of a recap, if you will, a co-occurring disorder in terms of how this played out with your 19-year-old son. He played high school soccer, And you believe that his actual problem, the deadly part of it, started at a party in the 11th grade?
Yeah, so that was when that was the first time that prescription medication really entered the picture. Marijuana use had started earlier, but then he recalibrated and did well. But I will say that the brain changes caused by marijuana use, particularly for those 25 and under, is something that we're not really paying enough attention to. The number of young people, with mental health diagnoses where, psychosis can enter into the picture, and just behavioral things and changes, like that's a really important thing. But for us, I think we didn't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. And so when you look at the national landscape right now, almost half of our teens in the U.S. have a mental health challenge at some level, 22% with severe impact. When you combine that with the fact, and the one thing that you can't see, listening to the PSA is the information at the end. 1 in 2 with a substance use issue have a mental health challenge. Let that sink in. So that means, and it's bidirectional. So if half of the people with a substance use issue are also struggling with their mental health, and when you look at of overdose, alcohol-related deaths, completed suicides, and you think about how many of those people have co-occurring disorders and they never even knew it. So co-occurring disorders, as a definition, is the combination of one or more mental health challenges and substance misuse and addiction. When I first started, and it's very hard for the national data to really to quantify the number because most people don't understand the linkage. So even if you're doing a survey, are you really answering it right? But when I first started, the number was floating around 10 million. There's a survey that they do, the National Survey for Drug Use and Health. The latest data is 19.4 million people in this country have co-occurring disorders. How many things in this country impact that many people that most people have never even heard of? And so Havas Media, Josh Cornrich, who's the senior producer for Havas, he lived in my community. He knew Harris. Josh is a couple of years older. That article came out in the New York Times. It was the cover of the Sunday Review. Josh reached out to his mom and said, "Can I reach out to Stephanie?" And he called me and he said, "I've been watching what you do, similar to you, the way I've been watching what you're doing, and I wasn't sure when the right moment would be, but this New York Times piece is the moment. Can I go to the senior executives at Havas and ask if they would do a public service campaign?" I said, absolutely. And so we worked for more than 11 months on the treatment, on the concept. There was an AI thing they looked at. There were some other things, but nothing was the right time or the right moment. You don't know the half of it was the working title for this campaign, because there's the part you see and the part that's hidden. And so when this concept for the party came to be, and they reached out to directors who were very high-level directors, many awards won by all of them, when they spoke with Daniel Wolf, who's the director of this PSA, he said, before we even get into the creative concept, you need to know that I was Harris. I grew up in England.
Wow.
I began self-medicating when I was 16 years old. I have to have this. I have young children. I want to change the trajectory. I want to change the conversation. I had done a TED-like talk for the National Council for Mental Well-Being. He said, I watched that TED talk. He said, this has to be mine. And so when you think about an advertising campaign, even one that's kind of got like a noble purpose tied to it, there's usually like a product linked, right? So there's like a connection. Here, the question was, what are we asking? What are we looking to the nation to do once they've watched this film? And it became abundantly clear that phase one was to educate the nation on co-occurring disorders, educating young people, their loved ones, schools, community organizations, the human beings that can change everything, the system of care, how we approach prevention, what kind of messaging goes out, how other people like me who've had loss like this, how they can advocate in their states and educate about this. So opioid settlement dollars are used for not just, getting the boots on the ground, but actually changing what we're doing to inspire people. And for those in recovery who never really understood how these were connected. And you know how many people have reached out and said, it wasn't until I got mental health support that I could finally sustain my recovery. I never knew I had co-occurring disorders. Thank you.
Wow.
Had I seen this when I was in high school, it might have made all of the difference. And now in Westchester County, where I am, so we met because it was the first year that we were doing co-occurring disorders awareness celebrations in April, which was Harris's birthday, and I wanted something to do on his birthday. My daughter was at Syracuse in college, and I needed what's it going to be? And we started doing a youth summit, awareness games, activities, announcements, social media tiles, posters, and opioid settlement dollars come in, and Westchester County put out its request for proposal, and they wanted innovative, game-changing, collaborative prevention. So now we're working with Partnerships to End Addiction. We're working with 3 of our coalitions. We're working with the faith community through Union Baptist Church. We're working with Westchester Jewish Community Services on the treatment side. And we are creating curriculum to be delivered in schools for co-occurring disorders awareness. It's going to be 3 sessions for health classes, an hour in English and Spanish for parents and caregivers, an hour for school personnel, faith leaders, coaches, community organizations, and we have Pace University doing the surveying and data collection so that this can become the nation's first evidence-based prevention practice. So,
well, folks,
it just evolved.
Let me just say this. You hear it in her voice. This lady is no joke. Her name is Stephanie Marquesano, and she's the leader of the Harris Project. She's a mother, Westchester County, New York, that lost her son, accidental overdose, 19-year-old son who had an anxiety disorder and ADHD. And his name Harris, he first turned to marijuana, later to prescription medications in an attempt to cope and manage. And 4 rehab stays, nothing worked, and he died at the age of 19. The New York Times story on you, right? 3 a.m. this morning, I was sad doing research on you, but thinking about how strong that you are and that you're fighting for everyone of different demographics. It doesn't matter the income, doesn't matter the race. I've seen photos with you with children. There are white children, black children, Asian children, Latino children. It doesn't matter to you. The New York Times article on you said, as part of the article, for most of his life, Harris Marquesano struggled to live inside his own skin. Is that accurate, and how?
100%. Accurate, because when you are popular and social and one of the funniest people, but also a really deep thinker, would watch the news, cared about world events. I mean, I often think about what he would think about the current world that we're in. The inside belied the outside. And he literally at times would be so anxious that he would almost feel his skin crawling. And so that is the challenge, is that you look at him, he's getting in trouble, he's loud, because he would project out what he was feeling on the inside. So it didn't make sense to many of the people around him. When you look at young people with behavior issues and you think, like, why can't they just hold it together? You should be thinking about what is going on in their brains that is causing them to kind of feel that this is the only way to make it go away.
Oh, my God. We are talking with Stephanie Marquesano, who heads the Harris Project. Please tell people that are interested in reaching out to you how they can reach you.
Absolutely. So it is Stephanie, STEPHANIE, at theharrisproject.org. Our website is theharrisproject.org. You can find us at Instagram at theharrisprojectcod. Same thing on YouTube. Same thing on Facebook. I'm at the Harris Pro on Twitter, and we have a TikTok that is also the Harris Project COD.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting radio-exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
We are talking with Stephanie Marquesano. Her 19-year-old son, Harris, died of what is called a co-occurring disorder, the dangers and threats of self-medication with drugs and alcohol for those with underlying mental health conditions. So, Mrs. Marquesano, I'm only going to keep you for a few minutes here. Coexisting disorders. Break it down to the degree of your son, how that existed.
So an anxiety disorder from the time he was little, picked up an ADHD diagnosis in 8th grade. Literally, first substance he turned to before he went on medication for his ADHD was marijuana. He thought that he was mellowing himself out, he would feel better, not realizing that he would get at times panic attacks, at times he would be kind of not really in his right mind, and not understanding that the cycle had to break. And so that's sort of what co-occurring disorders is, and that's how it came about for him. Then we switched therapists. He went on medication. He did really well. Anxiety comes back with a vengeance in 11th grade. His anxiety overwhelms the medication that he is on. He then goes to a party in my town. Prescription pills are available. He takes those pills again, thinking that he will feel better. And in fact, it led to, addiction. He would take whatever medications he could get his hands on. And nowadays, the kinds of medications that are out there, the adulterants in the supply, the counterfeit pill supply, makes this even more dangerous. It was bad for him and for us in 2013. It is more frightening now than ever before.
The fentanyl.
Yes, fentanyl, xylazine, test strips, the adulterants, the new things that are coming out. It's just so if you don't get to the root causes, if you don't begin to educate and empower out of the gate, how do you expect things to get better? There's always going to be a substance of the day. There is always going to be something coming in. So the ability to stop and think about your why. Am I doing this because I think that I'm making myself feel better? Am I doing this because I was doing it just like what I think, everybody does, but now I can't stop? The moments that you can change the thought process and get help and support sooner, the better off everybody will be. But then if the system is not designed to actually address co-occurring disorders, the shaming and blaming continues, or it's just substance-driven or just mental health, if it's not integrated, then you're still not getting what you need. People think you're going and getting treatment and support, but if your needs aren't being met, the likelihood that you're going to go back to using is extremely high, which is why, I guess, between the Opioid Settlement Board in New York State, but now working with legislators, for 2 years, New York State passed a single agency bill in the Senate to create a single office to unite the Office of Addiction Services and Supports and the Office of Mental Health. We're hoping this is the year that both the Senate and the Assembly pass those bills. I know there are going to be hearings about it. I know the ranking member of the Substance Use Disorder Committee in the Assembly, Assembly Member Keith Brown. We've done, huge forums in Long Island with him, in Nassau and Suffolk. He is a huge supporter of the work. He's introducing bills to make April officially New York State's Co-Occurring Disorders Awareness Month. making April 8th Harris's birthday, and it would have been his 30th birthday this coming year, to make that Co-Occurring Disorders Awareness Day, to include in the health curriculum co-occurring disorders so that the words are spoken. If we begin to introduce these concepts in writing by saying co-occurring disorders, you begin to do the steps needed to bring together the systems of care. When you look at the incarcerated population, the number of people with co-occurring disorders is staggering. When you look at the number of people who walk through a mental health door and have a co-occurring substance use disorder, staggering. So you need the clinicians to be able to deliver services. You need them to not be afraid of the other. So we need the education, the quality improvement project. So it's exhausting to talk about. And I know probably there's people in the audience thinking, what is she doing? Well, every step we do creates something else that we want to achieve. If we're doing prevention and young people are recognizing themselves in the narrative, we want to make sure that our providers can deliver the care they need. If parents are being told to write contracts and kick their kids out if they're not abstinent, we need parents to be doing programming like craft, community reinforcement, and family training to learn how to stay engaged with love and to be able to create healthy and safe boundaries, but to not disengage the way we used to encourage people to.
And what I'm thinking about, Harris from an affluent family and affluent community, he starts using drugs, but there's a separate mental health component going on, and by 19, you've got to bury your son.
That's it. And so if I knew then what I know now, I believe that my son would be here. And I think that the New York Times article truly unpacks the beginning, what we went through, and why this call to action was so abundantly clear to me. It was like the second he was gone, it was the moment where I said, they said they treat this. They said this is what they do. I don't understand. And that's when I said, I'm going to use everything that I've learned in my life along the way to do whatever I can to change things.
The New York Times article, and this is my last question for you, the headline on it said, experts say we have the tools to fight addiction. So why are more Americans overdosing than ever? What does that mean to you?
That means to me that the system is siloed. The system does not look at the whole person. When Harris came out of the first rehabilitation program, I had to take him to the psychologist, the psychiatrist, the intensive outpatient program, the 12-step meeting, and the gym. Recurrence and use in under 2 weeks. Integrated evidence-based once-a-week therapy, we are doing better and achieving better results just by doing that. So if the system, the billing forms, the assessments, all the things that go into, like when you walk through the door, if they can't address that, then nothing is going to change. The drugs are going to get more deadly, things are going to be more toxic. But if the system of care to help doesn't begin to change, we're never going to catch up. It's never going to get better. And so wow. Janine Interlanzi gave me a ton of leeway. She embedded with me for 6 months. She traveled with me. She participated in presentations and workshops and listened to young people and listened to the questions they asked and the experiences that were shared. She spoke to the experts who we work with in systems transformation with Ken Minkoff, with treatment with Paula Riggs, with the people in Westchester County who are doing the great work, our county executive, the commissioner for the Department of Community Mental Health. And she put together a piece that literally, piece by piece, put it all together.
Well, Mrs. Marquesano, one more time, for this national audience, how can people reach you if they're dealing with their children or a young adult, a co-occurring disorder, and they don't, obviously we don't want the same result, tragically, of what happened to you and your family. Your 19-year-old son, Harris, is no longer with us. How can they reach you one more time, please, or to make a donation for the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. So I am Stephanie at theharrisproject.org. The website is theharrisproject.org. We have a new page that Havas Media also created for us, so the donation button is right there. The link to the full 3-minute film with the visuals and everything are there on social media. So the Harris Project COD on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. My LinkedIn is Stephanie Marquesano. And on Facebook, we're also the Harris Project COD. The only place we're different is on Twitter, where the Harris Project, it's just the Harris Pro. That's it.
Are you able to celebrate anymore, or those days are gone?
So, there are a lot of grief writings on this subject. I have to say that I probably grieve more deeply than most of society, thankfully, but I also celebrate joy and positive things, because that's what Harris would want us to be doing. You're here for a certain amount of time. You give what you can, and you keep the people that you care about and who care about you close. And so it's really mixed. A lot of his friends are getting engaged and getting married now. We went through college graduations. Like, we are always in that place with him, but we celebrate the good as we can. That's what we do. And thank you for having me. And for those who are waking up and maybe struggling today, just know that there's help and support available. You are not alone.
Thank you, Mrs. Marquesano, for that. And folks, she is correct. You are not alone. And that is all the time we have for this episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You can catch me on 77 WABC weeknights, midnight to 1 a.m., on Sundays from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Go check out the Dominic Carter merchandise at the 77 WABC store. From Dominic Carter t-shirts to hats and much more, go to WABCRadiostore.com. Also, follow me on YouTube, where you will see videos from me about this podcast and the radio show, youtube.com/Dominic Carter. We'll see you the next time. Dominic Carter, Red Apple Podcast, Talk Radio 77, WABC.
I gotta make it.
Dominic Carter socials on Twitter at Dominic TV and Facebook and Instagram. Dominic Carter TV. Email at dominic.carter@wabcradio.com. Until the next episode, be well. And as Dominic always says, stay positive. The glass is always half full, never half empty. Dominic Carter City Hall.